better than today is fantastic to see, especially in a time like this around the world where there's many constraints and many things going on. In fact, it reminds me of the year in which Microsoft was founded. These two magazine covers came out the same week. The Popular Electronics magazine with the Altair was the one that Bill walked out in Cambridge and picked up and dropped out of school for. And rest is history, as they say, in terms of his excitement. But the same week, the Newsweek cover had the three-headed monster, the recession, the energy crisis, inflation. And I think we collectively as leaders today get to pick up both the magazines and really have one relate to the other in terms of solving real challenges the world has. And that's what grounds us in our mission as a company. When I think about our mission to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more, that idea of taking that most malleable resource that we have in terms of digital technology and relating it to the challenges of people and organizations everywhere is what we are grounded on. In fact, I would say, putting more of an emphasis, especially in a time like this, on what does achieve more mean? And how do we achieve more with less? If you're going to make the energy transition, by definition, if we want to have economic growth going forward, you have to have an economic growth paradigm that doesn't consume energy at the rate at which we are consuming. And that's sort of going to be, I think, one of the key things and a key imperative in the context of India and India's growth even. So to me, what I want to spend a few minutes, given the context of the overall conversation this morning, is the imperatives that I see that I think can be helpful as we navigate together this transition and, I mean, drive that economic growth, that achievement, while being able to do everything that we want to do with a lot less of resources. The first one, I think, is the cloud. I mean, the reality is it's been a pretty big game changer. I mean, when I look back, I participated in the PC revolution, the client-server revolution, and the cloud. Those would be the three major things, at least in my professional career of the 30 years. And cloud still, you would say, is in the early to intermediate innings, because the first thing, the data point which is still stunning to me is how much more efficient the cloud is, right? The cloud-native applications have really not yet begun. The fundamental point is that by 2025, you're going to have most of the applications anybody builds really at that efficient frontier of cloud native, right? It's 10x, 100x better even in some cases. But it's not just that. When you move to the cloud, for example, it's 70 to 80% more energy efficient. So if you want to sort of be more energy efficient on any workload, the first thing to do is to move to the cloud. And you also hedge against demand cycles, right? So by moving to the cloud, you're consuming only when you need it. So whether it's a hedge against energy, a hedge against demand, and get more efficient with cloud-native development. And so to me, that trifecta is pretty compelling. And so we are investing a ton. We have 60+ regions, 200+ data centers worldwide. In India itself, we have regions everywhere. We're expanding the regions, but we're adding a fourth region in Hyderabad as well. So we are very, very committed to making, I'll call it, the cloud infrastructure available everywhere. But it's just not in the cloud, because every factory, every warehouse, every hospital is going to also have, or every retail facility is going to need compute where data is getting generated. So distributed computing will remain distributed. And so with Azure Arc, we're even making sure that the cloud infrastructure gets truly embedded in the physical infrastructure. That's sort of the future of the cloud. The cloud's not just in our data centers, but it comes to every place where you need compute to be. And we see tremendous momentum today when it comes to cloud adoption. In fact, when I think about Microsoft, that's been the big, when in the client-server era, we sold a few servers in India. But in the cloud era, it's a completely different ballgame, right? When I look at every business and the cloud consumption, it's tremendous to see. We see Adani choosing Azure for its expansion, HFDC, using it, in fact, to consolidate all of the data platforms. And, Yes Bank built their super app. So tremendous adoption of cloud. And in fact, the more and more I talk to my partners and customers here, I get excited about sort of even the unique things that are happening in India using the cloud. And that's really definitely a real departure from the previous era. The next imperative, it's all in the news, everybody's talking about it, is AI. And there's no question that when we look back 5 years, 10 years from now, we will talk about this transition. The good news for us at least, is that this transition from client server to cloud was interesting. It was sort of harsh in some cases, but we made it. Whereas in this AI transition, this builds on the cloud transition. It's very hard because the large models that are creating this transition are all mostly possible, quite frankly, because of that cloud-native ability that the cloud provides to be able to train these large models. And in fact, one of the things that is sort of stunning is, we talk a lot about data and the amount of data that's going to be generated, but the point is these generative models are going to generate most of the data, right? And that is just starting. So we said, let's have some fun. So let's say we go to Dolly and ask it to generate some images. On Mumbai, it sort of creates beautiful art. This is going to be the future that you're going to all live in. So it's some of them are at least very interesting. Then we said, okay, that's cool. Let's ask ChatGPT, what does it think about the future of Mumbai? And it sort of came up with some pretty compelling narrative, right? I mean, it sort of has real optimism that I talked about. It also shares. It talks about both, whether it's infrastructure, the tech involved, the culture. So pretty cool. So then I said, okay, let's get to the real meat of it. Let's ask it to rank order the street food of Mumbai. And it has an opinion. So it did come back. And Vada Pav wins. And then I asked it, where can I find the best Vada Pav? Not that I want to create some kind of a challenge for anybody here, but it sort of came back with places. I don't know whether Bandra wants to argue its case, but it's here. And here's the thing. I then went on to say, okay, write a play where Vada Pav argues its greatness, and it did it. And so you should say, oh, okay, this is all fun. Let's actually see it. It'll prompt it, and a little bit of prompt engineering, and it came back. Even Shakespeare would be proud of that. The thing is, this is all fun and games, right? But think about what you just are seeing. You're seeing the emergence of a new reasoning engine. This reasoning engine, clearly we will have to talk about it. What's the responsible use of it? What is the displacement it may cause? Those are all real important considerations. But the other side of it is, let's think about how it can augment every one of us in whatever it is that we're doing. Every knowledge worker is going to be more creative, more expressive, more productive. Every frontline worker will be able to do more knowledge work than they ever were able to do because of this CoPilot being there for them. Every design task, whether it's software engineering, mechanical design, architecture, pick your design task, is going to be that much more productive going forward. So it's ultimately, in my opinion, going to accelerate human creativity, human ingenuity, and human productivity across a range of tasks. It's going to be probably a golden age of what was predominantly, if you think about the computer revolution, it created mass consumer behavior change and productivity for knowledge workers. But what if we could spread that productivity across the board much more evenly? To me, that I think is probably one of the biggest things that we can look forward to. So the first thing, though, you have to do is really build a very robust data infrastructure, because there's no way you can benefit from a lot of the AI if you don't have robust data infrastructure. And that's where we are investing a ton. When we think about the data infrastructure, you've got to have the best-in-class operational data stores for SQL and NoSQL, and that's where we've really, whether it's Cosmos and SQL, we've done some fantastic work. And in real time, by the way, in real time, you want to be able to take that data from your operational stores and feed it into your analytics stores. And from the analytics stores to governance, because one of the biggest things is provenance of data is going to be one of the biggest things we're going to be talking about. Where did this data come from? Where did the AI model get trained? Can I actually audit that training on top of that data? All of that, you need one integrated data framework. And so we're really making sure we build a fantastic piece of infrastructure so that it's available to every business. Then the next thing is, let's say you have the data infrastructure. Then the thing that needs to happen is, let me train these large models, right? So OpenAI, having grown up, quite frankly, in the cloud business from day one, when I look at the system we built to train, let's say, GPT-3.5 that's behind ChatGPT, it's unlike any other system. The compute storage network, it's not just say, hey, we have lots of GPUs. Of course, you have lots of GPUs. By the way, GPU clusters themselves look very different than general purpose compute clusters. But then the way you network them, way these large models cohere is so different. It's kind of a workload. The last time I sort of saw something like this was when Hadoop first came out and data parallel workloads in the early 2000s or mid 2000s. This is that on steroids in terms of really being very different. And we have the best infrastructure. The reason we are able to achieve, and OpenAI is able to achieve what they're able to achieve, is because of the amazing both training and inference infrastructure, which is just world-class in Azure. And we're going to obviously exploit that to the hilt in the coming months and coming years going forward. And we're exposing the output of all these large models, right? So it's not just us using these large models, it's about making these large models available as APIs to anyone to be able to go do magical things with it. And even this morning, I had a chance to see some fantastic sort of high ambition projects in India, right? One is a non-profit Seeds, which basically is trying to create disaster response technology. So what their idea is to take high def satellite imagery and convert that into essentially micro forecasts of disaster impact, so that then their volunteers can go to the households even, whether it's sort of flooding or any other type of disaster, warn them, do the preparedness, right? So talk about sort of a good use case of being able to sort of do those micro forecasts using large data. And another example is where the Department of Electronics is sponsoring this, the National Language Translation Mission, or Bhashini. One of the things that's probably unbelievable, amazing, great to see is India lead when it comes to digital public goods, right? I mean, there's India and then there is daylight. When it comes to the enlightened way India is building out digital infrastructure as a public good. And this is a great example of it. So what they've decided to do is that, look, language translation should be a public good that's available to every company, every citizen of India, and they're going off and building it. And in fact, one of the demos I saw this morning was very cool, where they took what they're doing and, because I was able to speak in Hindi and express essentially a prompt in Hindi, they even trained a model which is trained using GPT on so they basically fine-tuned GPT for data that is all government data in all languages, and I'm able to interface with it in any of the Indian languages, right? So they put up basically a WhatsApp bot that was built. So I think the type of innovation that's going to be possible, that truly democratizes the ability, if you can express a complex thought, you can get stuff done. And that, I think, uniquely in India has a huge, huge implication. Apollo hospitals, in fact, the last time I was here, I had a chance to talk about this because the problem, as somebody of South Asian origin living in the United States, I face this, right? There is no cardiac prognosis model that's trained on South Asians. And so the question is, when will we have a model that truly represents us? And that's what Apollo is going and building. So they are, through all of their deployment, are building a model that will have a more accurate predictive capability. And that's another fantastic use case. And that, by the way, will be available as an API through Apollo to every hospital in every place of the world. And so let's roll the video to give you a feel for the progress they're making.
We have 3 million heart attacks which are happening every year in our country. Heart diseases are almost like an epidemic in India. To prevent the disease, you require some cardiac risk scores, which tell the probability of getting a heart attack in next 10 years. Most of the risk scores are developed either in US or in Europe. So when we are trying to apply those risk scores on our population, the outcomes are not satisfactory. Apollo and Microsoft, we partnered and we used the machine learning to develop the artificial intelligence powered score. At the end of it, we have a non-biased preventive cardiac risk score for our Indian population. And initial results are extremely encouraging. The accuracy of this model is almost double the existing model. This helps me in prioritizing my patients, and we can start preventing the disease at much earlier stages. It's about saving lives, and that's what motivates me.
It's very, very cool. And they even went on to use, I think, create a digital twin, which you can visualize using something like HoloLens, where you can even see the state of the heart, depending on the risks and what have you. These are great examples when it comes to both data and AI. The next imperative, which I think is going to be equally important, is what's happening in the development of all this technology, of fusion teams, right? In fact, professional software developers and frontline domain experts coming together in a workflow to build these systems is the magic, right? So it's not just about software developers on their own. It's that combination. So whenever you are in an organization, in fact, I would say perhaps the most important imperative is to say, is everybody, when we talk about digital transformation, when the frontline domain expert in one of your branches or retail outlets or warehouses is participating in the digital transformation, that's the day your digital transformation is in high gear. So in fact, 70% of the apps will be these apps built by low-code, no-code tools, and it's just phenomenal to see that. The tool chain, look, we started out in 1975, the thing we first started out was building the building basic interpreter for the Altair, and obviously a lot has happened since 75, but here we are. We're essentially jazzed about the same stuff, which is building tools for people so that they can build more software and more technology. That's who at the core Microsoft is. So we have the best tool chain for professional developers. Visual Studio Code, VS Code is pretty much the #1 tool chain for anybody who does anything related to software. GitHub is where all the innovation happens today. It's the largest repository of open source development is happening there. And then, of course, everything that is happening with Power Apps. But start talking about GitHub. In the last year, when we talked about all of the capabilities of AI, the place where it first showed up in a fairly magical way was GitHub CoPilot. And GitHub CoPilot has been advancing. The idea that you can prompt it to generate functions was fantastic. Now you can start you can start coding in C++, so you can sort of have a repo that's C++. You can translate it into Rust if you wanted to. You can have explain code in English, so the ability to highlight a bunch of code and sort of have it explained back to you. Think about all the learning use cases. Or if you are a developer who's sort of trying to get yourself familiar with a code base that is foreign to you. So tremendous amount of progress. In fact, this, on the first of the year, on Twitter, I saw Andrej, who was the luminary AI guy, who was the head of autopilot at Tesla, had this thing where he talks about his own productivity. Andrej Karpathy is like one of the most elite AI developers out there, saying 80% of his code is being written by Copilot. I mean, this is a real game changer in terms of having a Copilot take somebody's skills and really automate it so that they can spend their time. It's not Andrej is not doing the most creative AI work. What he's doing is he's doing the creative AI work and getting a lot of the boilerplate work where the Copilot is helping. And so that, I would not be employable without spell check. And so think about what it can do going forward for professional developers. That's, I think, what we will sort of see going forward. The next thing is the Power Platform. This is perhaps the thing that gives me the deepest satisfaction, because I always was waiting for a day when frontline domain experts can participate in digital transformation. And by the way, that means better wage support for them, right? So once you have a retail specialist participating in the digital transformation, that means their wages are not going to be measured by what they do in retail, but they're going to be measured very differently. And that's a big deal for any economy. And so we built a full tool chain, whether it is about creating apps, doing BI, doing workflow automation, doing virtual agents. These are all things that a low-code, no-code developer can do, right? So you don't need to be an IT professional. And so we're very, very excited about the progress here. And to me, even here, all the AI capabilities, right? So for example, you can take a sketch of a document, literally draw it, and take a picture, and it'll generate the app for you. So similar to what GitHub CoPilot is, this is already shipping in Power Apps. Power Automate, you can natural language prompt. You can say, create a workflow where it takes an email that arrived in my inbox and send an approval notice to X, Y, and Z, and it'll just generate the entire workflow for you. So again, AI and its use within workflow automation. And just a couple of examples. I mean, Lambda Test is a startup on test automation out of India, doing very, very well. In fact, I think they have, pretty much a lot of the global Fortune 500 using them for their own automation and test automation. But here's the interesting thing, right? Their own internal usage is a very telling story of what a truly devolved team will look like. And in fact, they use GitHub for all of their collaboration. In fact, even if a new request is a pull request, so when a new feature is a pull request, so that means a marketing person inside a Lambda test or a salesperson is also doing pull requests as a way to really have the workflow of the company. And that, I think, is an interesting insight. Like I always look at it and say, hey, when the professional developer's workflow changes, it doesn't remain just for them. It just permeates throughout the organization. And that, I think, increases velocity. Another great example, this morning I had a chance to meet with Ram Kumar, whose photograph you see on that slide. He's visually impaired. He works for the State Bank of India in Chennai. He is non-IT, but is a domain expert. He's in the marketing department. And so he was able to take one of the business processes today that we use, it was all paper, and say, along with two other colleagues, just three of them, were able to automate an entire set of workflows, right? Build a full-on, I would call it, an ERP class system for what was a paper-based system, and deploy it. And it's being used broadly. There are multiple things, right? One, the fact is accessibility is a hugely important thing for us. We've done a lot in Excel, a lot in Visual Studio. We're doing a lot in Power Apps and so on. He had great feedback for me on all the other things. But it's fantastic to see someone like him participate in creating the digital transformation. The second is the fact that they're domain experts, not IT professionals. And the third is, most importantly, the customers of State Bank of India are the ones who are going to enjoy the benefits of all that digitization. And so that's the power of Fusion teams. The next imperative that I want to talk about is re-energizing the workforce. This is another place where there's a lot of data and, quite frankly, still a lot of learning. The first data point, in fact, we have got this data by country, and India is slightly different, but not that different. Like, one of the biggest things that's going on right now in the workplace is this debate, especially in knowledge work, where leaders and managers sometimes think that workers are not being productive. Workers are feeling very burnt out in many cases. And so there is this productivity paranoia, and we have to bridge it. We have to sort of bridge it with data, and we can't just argue about things. We have to ultimately get to some objective data, and the best way to do it is to align goals. Ultimately, every organization does have to produce output that is competitive, right? There's no questioning that. And so going back from there and seeing whether we're being productive or not, I think is probably the way to end the debate and the paranoia. The other one is we've also got to pick up some new soft skills, right? People don't come for policy. People come for other people. And I always say that, like, I have to, and every one of us has to learn the skills of organizing events, not just calling meetings. Just because I called a meeting, no one will show up. But if I said I'm organizing an event, they may show up. And I think rebuilding some of the soft skills of convening, soft skills of conducting meetings where everyone's voice is heard. These are all things that I think we'll have to just get a lot better at. And third is, just because you hired them doesn't mean you don't need to re-recruit them. In fact, one of the most interesting data points is how much people value constant upgrading of their skills as being critical for them to have loyalty for your organization. Right? If they feel their job is stagnant, they're not growing professionally. In fact, LinkedIn has this in India, which by the way is a very, very positive sign, is it's 2x the global rate in terms of people skilling and skill profiles. It's fantastic. I mean, this is where you kind of feel like you can go straight from there and be long on India, which is if you have a population which is fundamentally upskilling themselves and taking pride in it by posting in a social network, that I think is just great news. So those are things that I think every one of us as leaders have to really deeply care about. And that's the three systems we're building here is Microsoft 365, Teams, Viva, and of course LinkedIn as well. But these are the three core products that we're building. Microsoft 365, I mean, if you think about what the traditional office tool chain of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Outlook and all did for the knowledge worker, now when it comes to Designer or Loop or any of the new tools, these are all things that I think are going to take expression and creation. So all of those AI tools I talked about for generative AI are all going to be incorporated, right? So these are all like, today already I can go to Designer and prompt it to create. You can obviously imagine what's going to happen in PowerPoint. And so I think we are in a very early stage of every one of these tools having co-pilots that I think will help us all be much more productive. The Teams has emerged out of even this pandemic as a full-fledged platform. It's 5 things in one. Right? It has everything from collaboration to chat to meetings to calling and business process automation all integrated. And it's very, very exciting to see that the most interesting, important feature of Teams is the App Store inside of Teams. And in fact, you see a lot of these line of business. So when I build a Power App, I put it into Teams, and so people then it suddenly becomes a collaborative application where people are able to do this workflow automation in the context of the people that need to collaborate to get the job done. So great to see the progress on Teams. Viva is a complete new platform that has emerged again because just as creation tools are important or communication tools are important, the employee experience and organization productivity tools are important. And everything from skilling, right, which I've already talked about how important it is. So Viva Learning is one of the modules, but so is connections, right? Which is how do I really have frontline? One of the big things in pandemic was how do you make sure frontline workers feel connected to the mission of the company, have access to their regional managers, to their headquarters staff? Is there flow of information happening across them? So again, Viva Connections is about that. Viva Goals is a very cool tool. It takes that concept of OKRs that's becoming more and more popular, but most importantly, trying to really get the organization aligned on a set of outcomes and objectives, and then to be able to create the visibility on the key results throughout the organization. So just like what traditional office tools did for creation, Viva is doing for employee experience and organizational productivity. So, and a good example of this is what Air India is doing. Obviously, Air India is going through a massive transformation and investment phase of reinventing the entire airline. And one of the things that they're tackling front on is when you think about the future of an airline operation, the key thing is the frontline operations connected to the back office. And that's one of the places where Microsoft 365 and all of what it does is going to play a role as Air India continues to make progress on their strategic objective. The next imperative I want to briefly talk about is the imperative around business process, right? Every business process application going forward will be, one, more collaborative. Second, it will be data and AI driven. That means it will be much more proactive versus reactive. So when we think about, oh, I go to a CRM system, I go to an ERP system, that parlance will change. The CRM system comes to me. The ERP system comes to me with suggestions, recommendations, the next best action. That's a complete inversion of what I going to work in a biz app versus a biz app being transformed. So there's significant change here. We're building a full suite from whether it's customer service, finance, back office, front office, all of that in one integrated suite. I had a chance to meet with Senco Gold and Diamonds. It started with one store in Calcutta, and now it's everywhere in India, and it's fantastic to see the progress that one institution was able to make using, in fact, an integrated what was front office, back office system, right, where the information flowed without any category boundaries that were created by the tech industry, but were much more about the core customer and the customer interface. So when you think about the future of, especially in a consumer-driven economy like India, when you say omni-channel, that omni-channel interface of the customer is what will define everything that has to happen across the data silos on the back end. So we're very exciting to see that. Another one is the industrial metaverse. I'm excited about the progress that's being made here. The ultimate goal here is to be able to say, if you have a tool, if you can create a digital twin, the digital twin can allow you to take the physical operation and make it much more efficient in terms of energy use, because you can do simulations and reduce waste, you can reduce energy, you can improve quality, so lots and lots of benefits. In fact, L&T, I think SNS was here earlier, and I'm sure he talked about this, but the idea that 30,000 plus pieces of equipment that L&T has in the field across 500 odd sites are all connected back, streaming data using Azure IoT that are all being constantly analyzed and being viewed to improve the operations. So, when you think about in India, and the productivity of the infrastructure businesses is going to be a meaningful driver of the productivity of the economy. So it's fantastic to see the progress being made by L&T there. The last priority I wanted to talk about, the imperative I want to talk about, is security. After all, we have a real crisis. Something like $6 trillion is lost today because of cyber theft and crime, and it's projected that 10 trillion will be lost by 2025. So it's a real, the real epidemic, if you will, when it comes to digital. And the only way to fight that is to really have a zero trust approach, right? It starts with having products that are well integrated, right? Which is your identity system needs to interact with your endpoint protection system, which needs to interact with the apps at the endpoint, which then needs to be secured all the way to the infrastructure they use. So just having multiple control planes and data planes can in fact increase complexity if you don't really have an integrated zero trust architectural approach. But it's not just that, it's about a signals game, it's an intelligence game. So you want to take, in our case, we're taking all the 10 plus trillion signals we see, translating that into operational security posture. Because when you say zero trust, you have to assume breach and then see the breach. I always say to my teams, there should only be one victim of anything new and novel. And that's the key, right? You can't say there'll never be a victim, because after all, cybercrime by definition means there will be, the state of the art even there will keep moving. And the question is, can you detect it fast and then remediate and then make sure it doesn't laterally move? So a lot of work going on, a lot of investment, a lot of public-private partnerships in this space. But we have good momentum. Again, when it comes to the adoption of some of these security products across the board, whether it's Axis Bank or Tata Digital or Indigo or Godrej or Flipkart, tremendous amount of usage of all of these products in various forms in order to deploy a zero trust approach within their digital estates, which I think is a key imperative. And also I'm thrilled about this initiative, the Cyber Siksha initiative, which does two things. One is we know we need more people with cyber skills in the country, because it's the expansion of digital infrastructure is really translating into an explosion of jobs for cybersecurity. But the thing here is they're also tackling the gender divide when it comes to digital. So it's not only about skilling people, it's about skilling women in cyber so that they can then help us all collectively as an economy go forward is fantastic to see. This is an initiative that we are doing with the Data Security Society, and so it's fantastic to see Microsoft be a lead sponsor of that. So that's really the digital imperatives. Ultimately for us, it's about taking all of this, building out the Microsoft Cloud to help every organization to be able to capitalize on this and then move the organization forward to be able to do more with less. So I thought I'll end there and invite up Sanjeev Bajaj onto the stage, and the two of us can have a brief conversation on some of the implications of this. Sanjeev, welcome.